Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this event, policy exchange event on vocational training and education. We are very lucky to have the new Secretary of State, Nadhim Zahawi, for whom I think it's fair to say this is his first outing, at least on this subject. So we won't expect you to know all the latest developments on which BTECs are being phased out over the next few months. But it'd be very interesting to get a sense of your overview of this crucial aspect of government policy, something that Boris Johnson and of course your predecessor Gavin Williamson have placed a great deal of stress on, the kind of rebalancing of post-school education. And we've had a flurry of announcements. We've had a white paper, the Skills for Jobs white paper, lifetime skills guarantee, lots of big ideas and big promises after 20 years of very sharp cuts in adult education and in the FE sector. We have the promise of a lot more investment in FE. We've had the introduction of new qualifications, T-levels, and indeed the phasing out of some BTECs. We've got a still quite controversial apprenticeship levy, which has some achievements to its name, but doesn't seem to be providing very many apprenticeships for school leavers. We have a big interest in increasing the level of technical sort of level 4-5 in the jargon qualification, sort of sub-degree level technical skills, plugging the so-called missing middle of technical skills in this country. We lag behind a lot of other European countries in that respect, partly because so many people have been going to university in recent years, and the whole question of who delivers those, the collaboration between FE and HE on the delivery of level 4-5 qualifications is a big one. So it's a huge agenda, as I say, a lot of political energy behind it, and what's actually happening on the ground, though, is also what we want to hear about, and we have also on the platform, although they're not physically on the platform, we have put this event together for reasons you will understand at quite short notice. Gavin Williamson had been the man who was going to be sitting in this chair, but he's now moved on to elsewhere. And as I say, we're very, very happy to welcome the new Secretary of State. But we have coming in remotely, we have Angela Joyce, who is Chief Executive of the Warwickshire College Group, and I think is fair to say is the main FE heavyweight figure in Nadhim's constituency of Stratford-on-Avon. We also have coming in remotely Subra Krishnan-Harihara, who's head of research for the Manchester Chamber of Commerce to get the business perspective. And we have Sharon Davies, the chief executive of Young Enterprise. But here physically on my left is Philip Augar, Sir Philip Augar, I should say, although he hasn't had the knight on his shoulder yet. But I suppose you are still properly a sir. Sir Philip, I presume everybody in this room will know, is the author of the Augar Review, which has been very influential in framing the debate on the great rebalancing of post-school education, the kind of levelling up, if you like, of non-university education in this country. But so what we're going to do is Nadhim's going to talk for a couple of minutes. I'll ask Philip then to say a few words. Then we'll go to the people who are coming in remotely. Angela Joyce first, and then Sharon, and then Subra, if that works. So over to you, Secretary of State.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and it is great to see you all here. David, it's great to see you. Some of you will know, David does, that I've been in the Department of Education twice before. So I was there as David Cameron's apprenticeship czar. We had a lot of czars in those days, and I was sent in when Nick Bowles was a brilliant skills minister, and I walked in to his office. He said, "I do policy, I don't do implementation, so you go ahead and operationalise this thing called the apprenticeship levy and the levy reforms." And I have to say, it's always worthwhile just having a little bit of institutional memory. And I remember when we delivered those levy reforms, I looked at both the German model and the Swiss model, and one nugget that remained with me then and will remain with me now is the stability of the system. The real advantage in Germany is the system has been stable for 4 decades. So both the employers, the students, the parents, everyone understands the system. And that goes a long way in, I think, delivering real success, scale success, or success at scale, I should say, whether it be in apprenticeships or other parts of the system. I then returned to the department under Theresa May as the Undersecretary of State for Children and Families, what I at the time described as probably the most important job in government, because I had the responsibility for something like 75,000, they're now sadly 80,000 children who, through no fault of their own, we had to remove them from their biological parents, and therefore the baton of parenting was in our hand. And I have to, again, challenge myself now as Secretary of State with the department as to how well we do for those children. Are we as ambitious for them as you would be for your own child in getting them the best outcomes in life? I think there's a long way to go. If you look at the adult prison population or the adult population of those who are homeless, a very large percentage of those were looked after children in our system. I think we've got a long way to go, and I look forward to working with Will Quince, my new Children and Families Minister, who I think is equally passionate about this. And of course, now I return as Secretary of State for Education. I think I've got the most important department in government. The Prime Minister, when he appointed me, said, you and Michael Gove will deliver the levelling up agenda, because education is the building block for any sort of levelling up. If you don't have the basics, you can't do anything in life, whether it be creative, engineering, or otherwise. And so this is very much my agenda. I have only been in the department, I caveat what I'm about to say, for about 5 minutes, but nevertheless, I think we've got an exciting, at times challenging set of decisions to make, but equally, I think, important in terms of the skills agenda going forward. If you look at where we are versus the average OECD countries in terms of post-16 number of hours a year spent in education, I think we're at about 600 hours off memory. I think the OECD average is just touching 1,000 hours. T-levels will be at about 980 or 900 hours. So there's a long way for us to go to make sure that we deliver that quality, not just the volume. We did phenomenally well on volume. If you think about what we've done with the sort of the Cameron Coalition agenda, 4.8 million more apprenticeships. We focus very much on volume, but now I think the focus is very much on quality and quality of outcome. And part of that, again, I fall back on my own experience, as we all do. We always fall back, I think, on our own lived experiences or experiences of success. I remember when I founded YouGov, what I looked for was not people with great degrees or incredible qualifications, but people who were willing to learn on the job, who are technically proficient, but we can improve them, we can train them. And I think if we talk to a lot of that particular sector, and that is not the whole economy, of course, but if you look at the growth in whether it's fintech or other parts of the technology sector, a lot of the leaderships there say to me, and indeed to Nadhim Davies, who I was discussing this with the other day, look, we can train these people if you let us create the modules, if you let us create the content, we can do this stuff, and that is certainly an area that I want to I hope, build on and scale even further. And then, of course, there is the link between what we do in FE and as we get into HE. And I know Sir Philip is here and he'll say a little bit more about this. His report was incredibly important. We've implemented some of it. There's more to go. We'll consult again before anyone asks the question as to where I'm going to head with any HE reforms. But it is important. And I was struck by speaking to Manchester University and the incredible expansion and work they've done here in this great city of Manchester. But they made it very clear to me. They said, look, Manchester Metropolitan does a great job with degree apprenticeships. And rather than trying to compete with them, we should just support them and let them expand their degree apprenticeships even further. I think there is a debate or a conversation for us to have as to how we do that and do it well between HE and FE in our university sector. A lot to cover. David, thank you for having me here. I am in listening mode, so yes, of course, ask questions, but also any suggestions will be most welcome. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you. And of course, I should have said at the beginning that you come to the department with high expectations after your success as vaccines minister, so it may be there's only one way from now on. And now you're in the weeds of education policy. Oh yeah, go on then.
Thank you.
So Philip, a few words from you.
Thank you very much, David. So just three very quick points from the background, where we are now and what the next steps might be in my opinion. Background, I was having a quiet Friday afternoon 3.5 years ago, looking forward to the weekend. The Cabinet Secretary called me and said the Prime Minister then, Theresa May, wonders if you'd like to chair a panel reviewing tertiary education. On Monday, I found myself at a college in the Midlands with the Prime Minister launching this review. And it was what really intrigued me about it was that it was the breadth of the question. Initially, I thought she just meant higher education, but no, this was to be about further education, apprenticeships, online learning, in the workplace, everything, the whole thing. It was a really good question to ask. The first time I think there'd been a serious government review of this since the important Robbins report of 1963. So incredibly interesting field, and actually an unusual question to ask at the time, because although some people, notably the wonderful Alison Wolfe, had been looking at this question from an academic perspective for quite a few years, on the whole, people tended not to connect HE and FE, and I was very interested by what the Secretary of State had to say about the interplay between these important subsectors. So a really good question. And of course, since that review was launched, it's become quite obvious that skills and the vocational side and the missing middle, as David put it, are very important to the progress that this country makes. We see daily, evidently, proof of the skills shortage. Theresa May called it a concern with, I think it was left behind families. It's now called levelling up, but it's absolutely essential. I absolutely agree with the Secretary of State that education, and particularly in this sector, is the way forward as this country moves forward out of the pandemic. So a great question to have asked. I was lucky to have been asked to help answer it. I wasn't quite the author of the report. I chaired the panel, but we all contributed. But we feel we felt then that it was a piece of work that we hoped would influence opinion and in the end government. So that's the background. Second, where we are now. I must say I'm absolutely delighted and excited by the steps that have been made over the past couple of years. Lots of really good things are in place. I like the skills bill very much. I like the policy announcements that have been coming through. We have a framework against which we can deliver a complete reform of vocational education. I like the flexibility. I like the implicit in the skills plan, enabling people at all ages to study by modules and to transfer them potentially from institution to institution over the course of their lifetime. Careers change, the workplace changes. We don't all make the right decision at the age of 18. Some of us miss education altogether at the age of 18. Let's get into this later. This is an incredibly, potentially, a really seminal moment in this country's education system. I like also the skills plans. I like the way that that local employers and representative organisations are involved with FE colleges and universities in working out what's right for each area. This is not something that can necessarily just be handed down from Whitehall. We need to know actually what's going on the ground, and that connection between FE colleges, universities and employer groups is potentially really ground changing. So I'm very excited by where we are now and very supportive of the steps that have been taken. Last point from me, where do we go from here? It's really a matter of implementation. Some of you, I expect, work in the sector, and I know some of you write and broadcast about the sector. It's incredibly complicated. It's an absolute minefield, a sort of like an electrical wiring diagram, the way that the funds flow. Hooking all that together, making it happen, is a really big challenge. It's a challenge that has defied governments of all persuasions for decades, frankly. That now, I think, is the challenge we have going forward. And as you mentioned, David, the Secretary of State's experience on another quite tricky problem, vaccines, gives me cause for optimism. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're in the hands of the technology. Angela Joyce, who is Chief Executive of Warwickshire College Group, is, I hope, out there somewhere and going to respond to what she's heard.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, good. That's always a good first sign. Well, good afternoon. Apologies, I'm not in the room. I am, as you suggested in the introduction, just staying in Warwickshire so that I can report to Nadhim that the sun is shining in sunny Warwickshire. So that was the fundamental reason why I'm not in the room. I'd like, if I may, to make 4 points and probably closely followed with what Philip has just said. The first is that we are finally seeing a policy shift and a shift in thinking. And we absolutely must deliver on this shift in thinking and this shift in policy. I think for too long, we've lacked a long-term strategy and long-term planning. We need to address this urgently. Certainly a start has been made on that. We now need to go much further, much faster. I think the second thing I would say is that I think for the skills system and the college sector in particular, we've suffered underfunding and underinvestment in technical skills for over 2 decades. The funding reforms now need to be deep, they need to be meaningful, and they need to allow colleges the ability to invest in meeting local, regional and national skills needs. We next need to shift perception, reputation and create parity for technical and vocational skills. This will in part address many of the levelling up challenges that we're talking about. The strategy really needs to start from the age of 14 so that we can develop our talent to be the UK's future workforce, and we can then match talent to jobs. Apprenticeships in particular are not celebrated enough, even though lifetime earnings for apprentices are often so much higher than those who stay in full-time study. And lastly, I'd like to say that we need industry and education to collaborate and build a long-term strategy. And to enable that collaboration between industry and education, it needs government investment. T-levels need that collaboration, as do apprenticeships, as do upskilling the existing workforce, which are all part of the skills bill. This collaboration, I believe, can shift the skills system that has been reactionary for too long and create one that is progressive, meeting current and future skills needs. It has to be the government that helps us to make that collaboration happen. Thank you.
Thanks. Right. Is Sharon Davies out there somewhere?
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to this discussion. The point I'd just like to make really is that I think it's been a really positive step forward to see the government's commitment to lifetime skills guarantee, skills for jobs white paper. It does provide much clearer pathways for young people to progress into higher level training. And I think there's a real opportunity here to review the contribution of both primary and secondary education's pathways for alignment in preparing young people with the support and opportunities to build the skills and knowledge to make those choices at 16 and 18. The OECD research tells us of minimal changes in attitudes towards career options between the age of 7 and 17. And the Careers and Enterprise Company recommends career-related learning starts at 5, following research that perceptions of the suitability of different sectors and careers are embedded at an early age. So we have a real opportunity here to review and renew that connectivity between primary, secondary and post-16 education. I think it's a really exciting juncture that we're at. This isn't a new issue. Lord Young's 2014 report, Enterprise for All, talks about, for many young people, the 4th R is relevance, and that many only learn what they see when they can see the application of the lesson. So we know that finding ways to embed the practical application of learning is really important. It helps bring to life and make that learning relevant. So we welcome the greater involvement of employers in development of courses as part of the Skills for Jobs white paper. Relatable role models and accessible networks are key to levelling up. We want to be in a situation where we're inspiring more young people to consider those opportunities that we talk about, those technical skills. But we need to do that in a way that is early on in their education when those mindsets are still being influenced. We also feel there's a real opportunity to bake entrepreneurship into vocational learning pathways, both at FE and HE. And we feel that that will play a vital role in the post-pandemic economic recovery and the wider levelling up agenda, supporting young people to consider setting up their own business alongside technical skills represents a powerful opportunity to strengthen and support some of our most underserved communities and increase earnings through much more fulfilling work and provide a real alternative to low-paid, unfulfilling, unstable jobs. And the final point I would make, and is one that the Secretary of State actually made himself when he talked about YouGov, was we know building skills is key to helping young people prepare for the future world of work, but employers are telling us more and more that they're hiring for attitude and mindset. Technology is developing so fast, the new developments are coming through all the time. So as part of any debate on skills, we need to include the role of that enterprising mindset, that growth mindset, the ability to take a positive approach to problem solving, seeing learning as lifelong rather than something that ends after a qualification. We feel that has got a genuine contribution to make to the levelling up agenda. Not everybody will go on to set their own business, but we do propose that many, if not all of us, would benefit from developing that enterprising mindset regardless of a chosen career.
Thanks very much. So, last of our panellists is Subra Krishnan-Harihara from Manchester Chamber of Commerce. Subra, I hope you're out there somewhere.
Yes, thank you. I do hope you can all hear me. If you can, hello everyone. Good afternoon. It is an absolute privilege to present the views of Greater Manchester businesses to the Secretary of State and our reflections based on the Augar review to Sir Philip directly. So I have been asked to present the business view. It's primarily the views of Greater Manchester businesses. So let me start by talking about some of the findings from the research that we have done amongst Greater Manchester businesses. Now, for over 30 years, in every quarter, the Chamber of Commerce Network has run what is called the Quarterly Economic Survey. It is a employer and a business survey. We use it to gauge economic activity levels, business sentiment, and some labor market intelligence as well. Because included in the survey are questions related to employment and skills. And in the latest survey, which covers the third quarter of 2021, i.e. the previous quarter, we found that business prospects have improved. Customer demand has actually led to a significant increase in employment prospects here in GM, but also in the wider Northwest. So of the 483 respondents to that survey in just the previous quarter, around 300, so 62%, said that they had attempted to recruit staff in the last 3 months. But within that, an almost equal proportion, so 60%, also said that they had found it difficult to recruit the right staff that they needed. So the labor shortages issue is a real one, it is a serious one, and it is by no means new. So for example, in the last quarter of 2019, so pre-pandemic clearly, we found that about 50 to 55% of the businesses had attempted to recruit in that quarter, but then 3/4 of those businesses had also reported difficulties in finding the right candidates. And so when asked about the reasons why they face recruitment challenges, the single most important reason that was cited was the lack of technical and job-specific skills. And so that's a very damning criticism of the current system. And so our findings show that it is within the skilled and the trade occupations that we face the most shortage. That has been widely reported in the media, but this is coming straight from businesses as well. And then into that mix where we already have some labor shortages, we now have to factor in the need to reskill and upskill a sizable chunk of the workforce. So that's what we have to grapple with. But the good news, in our view, is that against that backdrop, the recommendations within the Skills for Jobs white paper, which was published earlier in the year, follow up to the Augar review report, I think that those two do offer a framework to start addressing these gaps. The critical thrust, the strategic thrust of the Skills for Jobs white paper was that employers should be at the heart of the skills system. We agree with that. But in its implementation, we think that putting the employers at the heart of the skill system requires 3 things. The first is a place-based partnership approach. Now, skills provision must take into account local needs. In other words, the assessment of skills requirements must be granular. It must be probably done at the local authority level, even if provision and delivery does require central planning and a city region or even a regional approach. It needs partnership. That partnership must be based on direct relationships between employers and our training providers, including our further education colleges, and to allow our FV providers to be truly responsive to business requirements. We think there is a need for organizations such as Chambers of Commerce and other business representative organizations to actually do skills assessment that generates real-time, all the time skills intelligence, so that constantly FE education providers are able to respond to employer needs. So that's number one. It's the place-based partnership approach. The second thing is has already been touched upon, which is the perception around further education versus university degrees. Now, employers need skills at all levels, and within the employer, vocational skills and job-specific technical skills receive pretty much the same respect and the same recognition as qualifications from universities. Building on the concept of skills boot camps and allowing our further education colleges to deliver bite-sized learning modules directly to employees can address to a great extent the labor shortages that we now face across the economy. So that needs a partnership approach, and it needs allowing vocational education providers to deliver the bite-sized learning that businesses often value. And then the third thing is using the tax system to stimulate more business investment in skills. And in some cases, in some sectors, for example, construction, although there is a widely reported shortage of skills within the construction sector, we find that only about 30% of the construction sector businesses actually invest a lot in training. That is not enough to address the skill shortages that we face. So we need to stimulate business investment on the job training, etc. And that is where the role of apprenticeships come in. So we can then use workplace learning and workplace training to deliver upskilling, reskill the workforce. It will deliver productivity gains, and of course, it enables innovation. And within Greater Manchester itself, the Chamber and the Greater Manchester Colleges group made a joint submission for the Skills Accelerator pilots. Even though we were not successful, our approach is based on the points that I just outlined. And we believe that is strictly in line with the requirements and the strategic thrust of the Skills for Jobs white paper. And so, we would like to see investment and HMJ actually encouraging investment both in Greater Manchester and in other regions, because addressing those skills needs is critical to delivering levelling up, which we so badly need here in the North.
Thank you very much. I mean, if I can just draw out a few points that have been made from our panelists. I mean, it isn't very encouraging, and we've had an apprenticeship levy now for is it 4 or 5 years, and yet still in Manchester, 60% of employers are saying that they cannot find the skilled employees that they want. I mean, that it really isn't good enough, is it?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you look at what the levy did, which is effectively to produce about 2.5 billion of investment in apprenticeships, a big leap forward from a decade ago. But we've got to go much further, which is why my instruction is to look at how we do that. How do you make sure that we, as Subra just really articulated beautifully, how do you bring both sort of the place-based, where you're getting really good data in terms of the local skills needs, with the sector on top. So before I take on the vaccines challenge, I was the business and industry minister, which covered pretty much 80% of the economy. So I covered everything from the foundation industries, so steel, all the way through to life sciences, and of course auto and aero, and the Business Services Council, which I co-chaired. And if you take, give you an example, if you take the chemicals industry, the chemical industry is very excited about having a sector deal with BEIS, with the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and really do understand place and need of their sector. And it's sort of overlaying those two things, which I'm working with Michael Gove on at the moment to make sure we get right. But a long way to go, nevertheless. I think the most important bit of real reform, if you'd asked me back then, when I was David Cameron's apprenticeship czar, that there'll be a prime minister that'll come along and say, by the way, you will have a lifetime skills guarantee, so that you can actually pull off modules any time in your life to be able to reskill, upskill, I'd have bitten your arm off for it, because it is probably the most important fundamental reform that we can make, and that is my focus.
Good. Just one other quick one from me. I mean, there is a bit of an elephant in the room here, which is that despite all this talk of raising the prestige and status of non-university post-school education, we are still, this year, a record number of young people, of school leavers, will go into British universities. And that's partly to do with the uncertainties related to the labour market post-pandemic. But we're also going to see a bulge in the university age cohort coming up in the next few years. So we could, despite all of this, and despite the fact that 1/3 of graduates are not in graduate employment 5 to 10 years after graduating, the graduate income premium for people who are not going to elite universities, is, particularly for young males, is becoming almost non-existent. There is a clear understanding, I think, including from parents. I mean, lots of surveys now suggest parents are much keener on their kids doing of some kind of vocational training rather than going to university. The kids themselves, not so much. 3 years away from home, still 50% at taxpayers' expense, if not more, is very tempting. And how we can sort of change the image, change the incentives for young people to start looking more seriously at these alternatives, perhaps particularly middle-class kids for whom it's just been an automatic rite of passage to go to university. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, one thought is you opened by almost creating this, them and us thing, right? And I want us to come away from that, right? This is not about sort of going to university and not going to university. It's about gaining the skills. So I want to challenge universities to do more in terms of the courses they offer. Are they really delivering a human being with a skill set that will give them a better life, a better outcome in life? or otherwise. So I don't see this as being a sort of a division about, well, non-university versus university. So I want to see universities do more on thinking around skills. Universities still do an incredible job, and I saw it firsthand, of course, with the work of Otley and UKRI on discovery and the investment in research that not necessarily is so obvious today in a particular sector, but can be transformational for the United Kingdom economy on stuff that we haven't even invented yet. So let's not forget that. But actually, I want universities to think about the sort of the skills that they are essentially delivering to that young man or woman who are going to university, and then of course the other side of that, which I think my brilliant friend and superb Chief Executive Angela Joyce talked about, which is the investment we're making, both in terms of the fabric of our colleges, but also in the skills ecosystem that is wider than just universities, which I think is going to be equally important. And I think you're right to challenge us to say, how well are you doing on apprenticeships? You chased a lot of volume. That's sort of pared back. Is the quality being delivered? And if you look at my early analysis, and again, I caveat what I'm going to say to you next, I've only been in the department for 5 minutes as Secretary of State, but many of you who've worked with me in the past will know that I am evidence-led. The reason I succeeded with vaccines is because we follow the evidence. Data and transparency is is the real strength. It is our ally in this journey that I'm going to take. I hope the whole department with the sectors as well, businesses and the overall education establishment. The real challenge is level 4 and 5. We're doing well on level 3. We've got this now fantastic commitment of people who've at whatever age, if they haven't got an A-level or equivalent, can actually go and choose around 400 different courses to do a level 3. But actually, it's level 4 and 5, which I think where T-levels begin to kick in, where actually if a student feels they've really been stretched in the way they are in A-levels, for T-levels, we begin to make a difference, in my view, but early days.
Good, thanks. Sir Philip, a quick word from you, and then I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience.
Two very quick follow-ups. First of all, on the HE-FE question, the right question to ask is not who should be doing this, HE or FE. That's not the right question at all. The right question to ask is, what skills do we as a country need? Once we know that, we can then decide where the provision comes. It might come from HE, it might come from FE, it might be apprenticeships, it might be independent training providers. But that is the key question to ask. And the interesting thing about the lifelong learning entitlement and the modularity, the ability to be flexible in your education, means that this question can be answered by both parts of the sector. This is going to be, I think, a continuum of provision between all of those types of providers. Just very briefly, Angela talked about the money needing to be deep, and I'm sure we all welcome the increased commitment to further education in the last couple of years, but we're now moving into an absolutely critical stage. To make the Lifetime Skills Guarantee work, it has to be properly defined, it has to be properly funded, and that, I think, will pose big questions, particularly in the current financial environment. So I'm not sort of counting victory already. It needs to be funded properly, and the funding needs to be structured in the right way. Still big questions to answer.
But Sir Philip, you say that what matters is the skills that we need, but we have a system that is essentially sort of consumer-driven. I mean, it's young person, student-driven. So if people are choosing to do lots of arts degrees or whatever, and not doing 4 or 5 technical courses, then lists of what skills we need will be useless.
I challenge that it's student driven. I think it's actually provider driven. the universities have a very powerful marketing machine, and they are selling, if you like, to a customer base of young people. Now, FE has to raise its game a bit as well, actually. That's really important. But and information is also important. Young people need to understand. We need to be open with them about where these education opportunities lead. I'm not sure it is student-led, David.
Okay. Let me ask so Adrian Wildridge from The Economist. I happen to know your name.
Thank you. If you go back to the late 19th century or even before, you can see endless government reports being produced which all have the same three complaints. One is technical education, vocational education, have low status. Two is that the system is incredibly complicated. And three, that it's always changing. Why should it be different this time?
Let's take a few more from the floor and do address questions to the people who aren't here as well. The gentleman at the front here. It'll take a sec for the microphone to reach you, but it is coming.
Thank you. Councillor Ankur Bhandari from Bracknell, Berkshire, and I'm also involved in education skills. Secretary of State, you mentioned lifelong learning. Sir Philip, you also mentioned lifelong learning, and I think we've heard different people talk about that in different ways. But one thing which I'm hearing is we are always talking about lifelong learning in the context of young students. My question is, at the moment with all the changes in education and demands of the marketplace, there are a lot of 30 plus and 40 plus professionals who are out of skills, which are current and they need skilling. What is our thinking on that? What are we thinking of providing them in terms of that they can reskill or upskill so that they are relevant to the marketplace? Thank you.
Thanks. A couple more. Woman over there.
Thank you. Lucy Fisher from The Telegraph. Mr. Zahawi, you have been and will be asked more sophisticated questions about FE and HE. Could I ask you just two quick questions about your wider brief? The first is, should school teachers actively encourage children aged 12 and over to get the COVID jab? And secondly, do you oppose face masks returning in the classroom, even if COVID cases soar this winter? Thank you.
And the woman over there in glasses.
Thanks. Dinah Kane. I lead on skills and education for the Creative Industries Council. My question's to do with the future of work. Dell Technologies has done research recently which says that by 2030, 85% of jobs as we understand them now won't exist. And I think it's interesting then to turn to data and the evidence that we all look at in terms of both developing policy and measuring quality and value. If we build that on a system of understanding which is about the jobs of today, how can we also meet, as the very eloquent person was saying from Manchester, immediate skill shortages and those important jobs of today, but also think about developing a system that is agile, fit for tomorrow, and doesn't make decisions now which actually undermines people's opportunities 10, 20 years' time.
Thanks. Why don't you answer both? Either of you answer whichever of those questions you would like to answer, and then we'll hopefully have time for another round.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let me try to take them in reverse. So, Dana, I think by co-creating the modules with industry, right? The worst thing we can try and do is government deciding what the jobs of the future look like, right? That just would not work. You need industry sectors because they move so rapidly to be able to do that work. Hence why the reforms, I think, were the right reforms. And that sort of takes me to Adrian's point, is that if your fundamental reforms are the right ones, yes, it does take time to bed them in. And I opened by saying, if you look at the successful models, whether it's Switzerland or Germany, where the stakeholders know and understand the system and therefore are able to play within it or understand the rules of the road and therefore can drive on it, we're still on that journey, is the truth. But I think we're moving in the right direction than where we were sort of pre-2010 and the original sort of apprenticeship reforms that we introduced, that we're now going even further and being even more ambitious about. So, but I also think you've got to just get comfortable with complexity, right? And my message to my colleagues in government, but also young people, is the world now is not just moving rapidly, but it is much more complex, and you've got to get comfortable with, and we've got to give people the skill sets to feel comfortable in that world, because not everyone does, right? How do you deliver that? How do you deliver that at school? And I think there was a one of the speakers earlier mentioned the importance of sort of the school system to giving young people that confidence, the wherewithal to be able to get comfortable with complexity. Councillor, you talked about sort of the older 30 and 40-year-olds. I think part of what the Prime Minister wants to do is precisely that. Now, it is a challenge. Let me try and bring it to life for you. Why is it a challenge? You've got to take, say, for example, right, a 30, 40-year-old working in oil and gas, mostly in Aberdeen, right, and see how you can reskill and upskill them, and geographically maybe have to move to offshore wind in the northeast of England, right? That is a big job in itself. And I think part of that is we've got to think about, what does that mean to that individual and their family? And how do we make that transition, not just by sort of providing the modules that they can do to be able to upskill or reskill. And then, of course, Lucy, two very good questions. Sort of off topic, but nevertheless, I will attempt to address them. As the vaccines minister, I can tell you that actually there are millions of 12, 15-year-olds that have now been vaccinated around the world. These vaccines are safe. Our best-in-class regulator, the MHRA, have regulated both the Pfizer-BioNTech and the Moderna vaccines as safe. Of course, we're using Pfizer as a single shot. We have in the United Kingdom a very well-established, capable clinical team that does this work in schools, which is the school-age immunisation system. They're doing that at scale. I think it's the right thing to do. The CMOs of England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland, different governments, all came down to the same conclusion that it's the right thing to do. And I would encourage all families to look at the evidence and the information and, of course, make that decision for their child. And then on face masks, we have contingency plans in the department if we see a further disruption. My very strong focus has to be to protect education. The one thing we've learned from the Children's Commissioner, Rachel D'Souza, in her brilliant Big Ask survey, 500,000 kids responded, 2,500 children of families from the Gypsy and Roma communities, over 16,000 kids with SEND. Massive survey. Do you know what they found out? One is actually those young people are not snowflakes. They're pretty resilient. They've done pretty well to get through this pandemic. Two, they do want additional support on things like mental health, both actually face-to-face, but also they value online counselling, one-to-one counselling on that. But we have got contingency plans to make sure that education remains open, because actually what they told us is they really value being back at school with their schoolmates, in front of a teacher, learning and letting those creative juices flow.
Great, thanks. Philip, did you have a quick word? No need to say anything if you haven't. But I would like to hear from our remote panelists if they want to respond to any of the questions they've heard so far. Is that technically possible? Angela, are you there?
Yeah, I'm happy.
It's like a séance.
Thank you very much. And I. If I may, I'll make a few comments about some of the things that I've heard, if I may. The first, there was a comment about how we change the number of young people going to university, and university is seen as the route. I'd just like to add to what's been said by saying, actually, wouldn't it be great if schools were less encouraged to just be judged on the number of young people that go to university. Because I think that's been the case for so long. Wouldn't it be great if schools were judged really positively on the number of young people that go into an apprenticeship or onto a technical course? So I think, just to make that comment really, I think there's an opportunity for kind of system change around there. I think there was also a question about what's different this time. I think probably the Secretary of State needs to probably declare what's different, but I suppose I'll declare my view, which is we've just had we've had a national crisis, a pandemic, and there's been a major change in the country, which was something we talked about for a long time and less so now, which is Brexit. And therefore, I think those two things mean that actually the kind of pressures on the skills system are evident even more so now. And therefore, for me, I think sometimes to really drive change, you almost need a good crisis to change the way that we think. And I think we've had two really, really massive things taking place in the country that I think makes me think this time we really will make a difference. Two other things, if I may, just on what's been said. The upskilling agenda and the kind of the comment about the 30, 40-year-olds who need upskilling and reskilling. Again, I agree completely with everything that's been said, about the skills bill. The modular-based learning is really important because, from our point of view, there are lots of adults who don't want to have to come back into full-time education and they can't. So we need that ability to modularize and kind of dip in and out and develop people in the right way. And I think the modularized approach is really significant. And the other thing that I don't think has been mentioned is, of course, the lifetime skills guarantee comes with a change around loans. And therefore, there is a change in the way that individuals can access the learning and I think that and finance the learning. So I think that's really important. And last thing is that around the future proofing of the skills and the jobs that are coming that we don't yet know about. For me, I go back to the comments I made earlier about the collaboration between business and education and doing more and more of that to allow us to kind of match the skills needs. So I'll pause and let somebody else speak, but I just wanted to chip in with those points if I may.
Thanks, Angela. I don't know whether Sharon or Subra are gagging to say something. I mean, it's fine if you're not, because we can just have another few more questions from here. But if you are out there somewhere and you do want to say something urgently, then speak now.
If I might, I'll just add just add one point. This is Subra from Greater Manchester Chamber. I'm just drawing on the experience of having delivered one of the employer ownership of skills pilots between 2013 and 2017. We had close to 300 apprenticeship starts delivered in Manchester as a consequence of that. And now some of the young people who did not complete their apprenticeship qualifications did not receive those qualifications for the reason that they could not complete the English and the maths modules within their apprenticeship. Although they had successfully passed all of the technical qualification modules. Now, that to me highlights two things. One is the importance of schools within this debate. And then the second thing is the importance of careers advice that is given to young people and who it is from the schools that we are pushing towards the apprenticeship routes. And when we engage with colleges, one of the things that is even now cited is that the focus on university admissions is such that, shall we say, the more academically able students are almost always encouraged to pursue the degree route. And that, I think, needs to change in terms of the career advice and service provision within schools. And then the second thing is obviously the future requirements. And I think the future requirements will emerge only through partnerships. And it will, nobody can predict what the future is. There will obviously be new jobs that will be emerging because in 2007 or 2008 or even in 2010, I don't think we had Instagram influencers as a possible career option. or digital media managers or digital media marketing as a career option. So I think those things will organically emerge. So the fundamentals is on what the Secretary of State, it's about adaptability, the soft skills, and the ability to handle complexity and change.
So, Subra, can I just ask you, you have this Code Nation is quite successful, I think, sort of boot camp, coding boot camp based here in Manchester. What kind of is it a success story? I mean, I've read glowing things about it, but what kind of people are doing it? What kind of people are doing this coding work? Are they retraining bricklayers or something? I mean, who are they?
The skills boot camps generally, especially the ones that are delivered in the software development coding side, are immensely popular. They are successful. And we have had members who deliver actually go on win national awards for the kinds of training that they deliver. So to answer the second part of your question, which is who is actually taking up these boot camps, actually lots of reskilling is being delivered via the boot camps. Now, I don't know whether it's a bricklayer, but people who may actually want to start pursuing a career in technology and digital, there are lots of them taking place. And the other thing that the skills, these boot camps, digital boot camps have delivered is opportunity for women within STEM professions. Because especially women and some people from ethnic minorities who may not necessarily have had that opportunity earlier on, they are using the coding boot camps to actually change their careers to take up a STEM profession within digital. And that to us is a brilliant outcome.
Good. Okay, thanks. I think we just got time for a couple more questions. The guy in the kind of sludgy brown jumper.
Thanks. So Tim Smith here from Multiverse. We're one of the fastest growing training providers in the UK. There's a discussion about evidence-based policy, and I want to find out what is the metric by which we should judge the success or otherwise of vocational education in the UK?
Have you got as big a slice as you and Blair? And a lady at the front here, I think it's going to have to be the final one, I'm afraid.
Fatin Delamy from Glasgow. Education obviously is a devolved matter to Scottish government. However, and it's obviously education in Scotland, so is prescription is free in Scotland, and that is what it's really saving the survival of the SNP, the Scottish National Party. However, it's affecting the percentage and the number of Scottish people, young people, to have access to the universities, higher education or further education. What pressure that the Right Honourable Zahawi, can you put on the Scottish government to increase that percentage, because the percentage that is actually only 35% of our Scottish students to have places in universities and higher education, 65% to the foreign student, because this is the myths about free education. So the foreign student can
including
play
the English students.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's what pressure can you put on Scottish government, if you can, for Nicola Sturgeon? We want to get rid of her as soon as possible.
Might come low down the list in the nuclear submarines. I'm afraid that is a final word, perhaps from Philip first, and then you winding it all up, Secretary of State.
I mean, just great questions. Thank you very much indeed. I mean, I think we've never had such a good framework to answer this question. Actually, it's really all there. All the right bits and pieces are there, the lifetime skills guarantee, local involvement, modularity, but in the end it's all going to depend on the money, and actually getting the money to do this properly and to make sure that the money flows through is really now essential. Over to you, Secretary of State.
Too right. Tim, great question, and I know that you are probably coming to see me soon anyway, because he reached out to me. I'm very happy to engage with you. You've done a tremendous job. I guess what does success look like is where your question is coming from. So the way I see this is whether it's Bayes or DCMS or DEFRA, they are my sort of, they should be my challenger department, my client departments, right? Because together we should be able to, with the different sectors that make up the economy, Base has about 80% of the economy, Treasury has finance, digital and so on, manufacturing, of course, is shared between DEFRA and Base, and we should be able to have a model which essentially gives us a shape of the economy with what skills gaps are there. We've got some of it already in the Department of Education. I think we need to get much better at doing this type of work. And for me, what success looks like is if by the end of this Parliament and then beyond that, so next 5 years, next 10 years, we're beginning to address those gaps, and those young people or those 30 to 40-year-olds who are reskilling or upskilling are in those jobs that the economy is creating, then we'll do something good. And we can measure that, right? That is measurable, and that is what I intend to do. Fatin, thank you for your brilliant question. The best thing I can do is to demonstrate to my Scottish opposite number, who I work very closely with, as I do with Northern Ireland and Wales, the great advantage of having universities that are able to take more young people who want to go there, but also challenging universities, as I opened by saying, in terms of what are they equipping those young people with at the end of their time at university, to be able to give them that sort of enhanced, I hope, life chance going forward that I got after graduating from UCL.
Thank you. Now, I just want to ask, hang on, I just want to ask a final little, bowl you a little googly. I want to test the new FE special relationship in Warwickshire. I read in my FT the other day about Warwickshire College Group that Angela Joyce runs, wanting to take over this place, Morton Hall, in order to turn it into a training school for the hospitality industry. But your department is refusing to cough up the £9 million for the renovation that they want. Are you going to cough up the £9 million for the renovation of Morton Hall?
So the right answer, because otherwise I would be a very bad Secretary of State if I said yes or no on a panel at the end of a conversation with the brilliant David Goodhart. But nevertheless, the right thing to do is to look at it properly and respond in the right way after I've looked at the evidence, because I will always be evidence-led.
Very good. Anyway, thank you for... Thank you very much.